Judge Beryl Howell said, in a cringeworthy twist on the Shakespeare line, first thing we do, let's kill all the lawyers. She said, and I quote, Donald Trump has turned it into, let's kill all the lawyers I don't like.
Yeah.
That's some pretty strong language from a federal court judge.
Just when you were celebrating Ed Martin not getting... You were celebrating Republican Senator Tillis says no to Trump's nominee to be U.S. Attorney for D.C. And Trump then said, we have someone else that'll be great. Of course, on cue, it's Judge Jeanine. Your thoughts?
Yeah, frying pan, meat fire, right? So Ed Martin, who was a horrific choice to be top prosecutor in D.C., never prosecuted a case, never tried a case. He will be shifted over, apparently, to be, selling pardons on behalf of the president while Jeanine Pirro takes over the reins, at least potentially, as the top prosecutor in D.C. We'll see what investigative journalists dig up about what she's been up to in the last 10 years or so. I look forward to the reporting. But, she at least has a background in law, which doesn't necessarily equip her to be the top prosecutor in D.C., but I will say that she may be better than Ed Martin because at least at one point in time, she was a prosecutor and a judge. We'll see if she entirely has lost her moral compass by courtesy of the yammering on Fox for a decade. But, this is just, again, an insult to both the prosecutors who work in that office and to the people of the District of Columbia.
Well, and of course, she was a big part of the Fox News lawsuit for all the election lies. She was one of the foremost, election deniers. So it's just, you're right. Every time, some nomination goes down, you go, oh, God, what new Batman villain is it going to be this time? And here we are. I mean, all right, speaking of Batman villain, Stephen Miller says Trump is actively looking at suspending habeas corpus, because of course he is. Our friend Tristan Snell tweeted right away, this would allow government to arrest, exile, detain, even kill any of us with no trial, no lawyer, no judge even ever hearing from you. It would be the death of freedom in America. Here we are, another day, another outrageous
the writ of habeas corpus, or the great writ as it is known, is to try to prevent our government from unlawfully jailing us, unconstitutionally detaining us. So, of course, Stephen Miller says he wants to suspend, the Trump administration is looking to suspend that right of the American people not to be unlawfully detained. Why? Because he thinks it will assist in Donald Trump's deportation efforts. So think about it. Stephen Miller announced that he wants to violate the Constitution to try to help Donald Trump violate the Constitution by, violating due process rights of the people they're trying to ship off to prisons in foreign lands. Now, this will not stand, at least not in the courts, because you can only suspend the writ of habeas corpus in times of rebellion or invasion. Think the attack on Pearl Harbor. They don't have it here. It doesn't mean they won't try to do it, but I believe the courts will say, sports, stand down. You can't do it.
Ron Filipowski made a good point, I thought, Glenn. He said, MAGA thinks Dems upset about the Trump administration suspending the writ of habeas corpus, which is essentially declaring martial law, is a self-owned since Lincoln did it during the Civil War. Yes, it was designed for things like a civil war, not for judicial decisions you disagree with.
Yes.
We are not
and it was even
at
ruled
war.
It was ruled unconstitutional when Lincoln did it as well. But yes, it's only been invoked a handful of times when arguably we were involved in a rebellion or an invasion. We are not. And Steph, that judge, they just tried to do this with the Tren de Aragua, right? The Venezuelan gang. Even that, the court has ruled, the federal judge has ruled, no, we're not being invaded by Venezuela. You can't do it. Right. So this is like trying to violate the Constitution on steroids. You can't do it.
Well, here's the ridiculous. Stephen Miller said, look, a lot of it depends on whether the courts do the right thing or not. Obviously, courts are the arbiters of what the right thing is in the United States. So, the levels of how ridiculous this is. It's allowed only when the U.S. has been invaded, as you say, or during an insurrection, which would not allow people to challenge their incarceration in court if they're arrested or detained. Okay, I'm not even sure what my question is.
Yeah,
I'm just
but Steph, take some comfort in the fact that the federal judges, including lots of Republican-appointed judges and Trump-appointed judges, are holding strong and telling Trump over and over again, you can't do it, can't do it, can't do it. So that is something, that's a point of light we need to remain focused on.
Yeah, I want to get your take on what Senator Amy Klobuchar said yesterday.
I've made very clear that we are heading closer to one, but the reason we're not in a constitutional crisis like we have been at any moment, other moments in our country, like, say, the Civil War, when the states were actually dividing and seceding, we are not in a constitutional crisis because of the courts of this country. Over 100 of them, including multiple Trump-appointed judges, have stood up and said, hey, this is unconstitutional.
Okay, but is she correct? Because we're not at the compliance part. Like, yeah, as you and I always talk about, sure, the courts are holding in many places, but they're not complying. So doesn't that make it a constitutional crisis?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a constitutional crisis light, which sounds like an oxymoron, but because he has not been complying with lower court orders in a timely fashion, right? He was ordered to facilitate the return of Abrego Garcia.
Right, that's Supreme Court. That's not a lower court. That's Supreme Court.
That is. But because the lower court, because the Supreme Court was so mealy-mouthed, and, we want you to facilitate, but we don't want you to effectuate. We want you to do it, but we don't want you to do it in a way that would insult the foreign policy prerogatives. So we are there. Listen, we are in fact in a constitutional crisis, but it hasn't come into full focus yet. But Steph, the Supreme Court, at least 7 justices, need to put their dang foot down and say, okay, you didn't get the picture there, sport. Now we are telling you to return Abrego Garcia on a date certain. Here's the date. Don't do it. And then we're going to begin contempt proceedings and start throwing people in jail for violating court orders. That's what this has to come down to.
The Supreme Court is saying we'd like you to obey the law, but we don't want to be, rude about it. Right. Chris and I have one dream remaining, and that is that some judge uses the word sport in one of his rulings.
Please?
Can't do that, sport.
Yeah.
Or champ. That's fine, too. Okay. Speaking of wins, Trump administration must halt much of its dramatic downsizing of the federal workforce. A California judge, California, ruled on Friday. Judge Susan Ilston of San Francisco issued the emergency order in a lawsuit filed by labor unions and cities. One of multiple legal challenges. The court holds the president likely must request congressional cooperation to order the changes he seeks. So here we are yet again, right?
Yeah, and once he starts outright just kind of trying to destroy our constitutional construct of government where the executive branch has to abide by rulings of the federal courts regarding whether what the president is trying to do is constitutional or unconstitutional, that's when I think the tide turns even more than it has turned against him. And regarding the sport thing, yes, let's keep hope alive. But let's not forget, Judge Beryl Howell said, in a cringeworthy twist on the Shakespeare line, first thing we do, let's kill all the lawyers. She said, and I quote, Donald Trump has turned it into, let's kill all the lawyers I don't like.
Yeah.
That's some pretty strong language from a federal court judge.
Oh, hey there, it's Stephanie Miller. If you're like me and you love sharp political insight, pointy, you like it pointy and sharp, bold opinions, and a touch of humor to make sense of these crazy times, have I got some fantastic news for you. The Political Voices Network is now on Substack. This is your new go-to for the best in independent media. We're talking about my show streaming daily with episodes on demand, the fearless of journalism of Brian Karem, the brilliant side-splitting satire of John Fugelsang, the unrelenting working class advocacy of Rick Smith, and so much more. Here's the best part. Subscribing is so easy. You can join for free or go to the extra mile. Support these incredible independent voices by signing up for a full subscription starting at just $8. You'll get access to exclusive content, behind-the-scenes insights, and a chance to directly fuel fearless, unfiltered media. So what are you waiting for? Head on over to politicalvoicesnetwork.com, hit that subscribe button, and become part of the movement keeping truth alive in an era of corporate media overload. Every subscription helps, especially yours. One more time, that is politicalvoicesnetwork.com. Sign up now. Do it.